Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, but my god are we starting to see everything get better. As of the time of recording, which is about midday, we can see that Reform UK have 123 seats that they have won, and are up 123 seats, while Conservatives have managed to hold on to 49 while losing 98 of them. Lib Dems actually made a bit of a gain to 25 seats. Labour have lost 31 seats down to 16, with Independents down and Greens slightly up. Now, there is absolutely no denying here, obviously, this is an outstanding result for Reform, and this is just the council elections. Obviously, we've had others that we're going to have to go through. But on the local level, you're expecting something like a four-way tie, more or less, with each of the four parties at the top here sharing between the 350 to 400 seats range, which again would be very good with Reform. That puts them on level with the three other main parties who managed to win big at these council elections. It's excellent news, no doubt about it. As the day goes on, I'm expecting to see more results of the overall control, which so far Northumberland is the only county to have announced a winner, which is that there is no majority control. There's absolutely going to be some of that too. At the end of the day, we are a system that is supposed to cater to two parties, and, well, at the council level, that typically doesn't tend to actually happen. You tend to have quite a few councillors from different parties all joining in, but there's usually one clear winner. But I think you're going to see no overall control in a few places this time round, along with some Reform wins and obviously some Labour wins. Tory wins? That might actually be a struggle, but we'll see. But in other areas such as Lincolnshire, where we are seeing an awful lot of county councils already showing their results, and it's unfortunate because the areas that are announcing are rather large, but it does look an awful lot like a teal wave that is taking over parts of the country. I would not be shocked if Lincolnshire does end up with a Reform-controlled council, because not only are they already winning in terms of the number of council seats here, but Andrea Jenkins won, and not only did she win by what can only be considered a landslide. We are talking about a majority of 40,000 votes. Over 40% of the electorate voted for Reform UK in Lincoln, and I can only imagine that is due to their hard work and on-the-ground attacks to go out there and get the votes for these battleground areas. And it's worked out really well. It worked out exceptionally well in Lincolnshire. The BBC, being right-wing as always, said Reform UK's Andrea Jenkins is the new mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, marking a return to politics for the former Greggs Worker and Miss UK finalist. Which I just find hilarious, because if you're going to go through Dame Andrea Jenkins' CV, perhaps it's worth bringing up that she was an MP for 12 years, and that's also the most recent thing she's done. I suppose you could always also argue, oh, they're saying that you can go from a Greggs Worker to being Mayor of Lincolnshire. However, it's the fact the only other thing they bothered to mention was the fact that she was a finalist for Miss UK. But maybe I'm reading a little bit too into it. If you want to see a slightly more obvious attack, we just have to go over to Sky News.
Can I just ask about the nature of the campaign? You said it was a dirty campaign, but you just used your speech to smear other candidates and to bring up all of that dirty laundry. Do you think that's appropriate?
Well,
so just for people that might not know the context of dirty tricks that do seem to be played against Andrea Jenkins, largely because she's a Reform candidate, I would imagine, the biggest trick that was tried to play against her was effectively taking her to a hearing in the courts to try and claim that her candidacy was not legitimate because she didn't live in the area. Now, this isn't particularly against the rules, as the hearing actually found, but the reason for that was effectively because she could move her and her entire family to the Lincolnshire area so that she had an actual address in the Lincolnshire area, and so she could actually be the mayor of Lincolnshire. She is ultimately from Lincolnshire, so it wouldn't be difficult anyway. But there's tricks like this to try and strike off Reform UK from the ballot to go forward so that effectively they had no chance of winning. Anyway, the court wasn't having any of it, and she still stayed there. And so obviously she was very annoyed at that, because that hearing only happened I think it only just happened this week, actually. I think the hearing was Tuesday. That's how close it was. And the problem is that it wouldn't have even affected anything, because all that would happen is that the election gets postponed. But at the end of the day, that's all that an awful lot of the establishment wanted. Labour mainly, but this was a Tory place, actually. And neither of them particularly want Reform to do well, because ultimately you keep momentum up. That's very good for politics, especially if you're an outsider. It's what happened with Brexit. That's the only thing they've learned from Brexit. Outsiders can win as long as they have momentum. And the worst way to try and fight that is dirty tricks. Anyway, she goes into details.
I ask you, if the police was called on you for something unfounded, if you was reported to the council for something that was unfounded, wouldn't you want to speak out about it?
Yeah, so on top of the hearing to try and get her struck off the candidates list, there are also official complaints made to both the council and the police about what sounds like completely unfounded things. These seem quite reasonable to bring up in your speech. You tried to take me down and you failed. I've not listened to her speech, but I wouldn't be shocked if she effectively calls them something along the lines of, "you bunch of snakes."
But you're elected to be a representative for this county now. First mayoralship. Do you think it's appropriate for a politician to be speaking?
I think it's important to restore trust in politicians by speaking the truth.
And I'm completely with Dame Andrea Jenkins on that. If people have done this and fraudulently sent in police reports and things like that, they should suffer consequences for this. Yes, I do include Zaya Youssef if he did that to Rupert Lowe. But my god, that's a whole issue I'm going to get on a little bit later in the video. I'm not going into that yet, but I have things to say.
I spoke to the Tory candidate. He left when you said migrants should be put in tents. That's good enough for France. That should be good enough for them too. Do you think that's a divisive way of conducting politics?
I think it's what the majority and the silent majority think.
I think you're correct there, and I think anyone that has been saying, oh, Reform are softening up their touch and things like that are completely wrong. This is a brand newly elected mayor of the entire Lincolnshire area effectively saying they will be put in tents before they are put in hotels. Ideally, if she has that power, which I'm not sure as mayor she does. However, it's very much a line in the sand of where Reform are. And in fact, I have a clip of that moment in the speech.
Now, to the people of Lincolnshire, I will fight for you. I will not shy away from asking tough questions and challenging the two-tier system.
It's about as close as you can get in politics to a rage quit. And don't get me wrong, I've been through videos of old council by-elections where Reform paper candidates, were on the ballot and they got a few hundred votes. And they just left early because they were paper candidates. You know, it's not like it's unusual for this to happen. However, this was every single other opponent that was there. And I'm not surprised they wanted to get out of there. They got decimated by Reform and Dame Andrea Jenkins. So all the people saying, oh, she's an ex-Tory, she's terrible, what are ex-Tories going to do? She's got up on stage, said one of the most base things that I think you could ask for from a mayor, and everyone decided to leave the room who was against her. I think that's pretty good going. Anyway, when it comes to the other mayoral elections, well, we are still waiting on the Luke Campbell, Hull and Yorkshire mayoral race, which is the other likely one to win. We are pretty much, as Reform, looking at 2 mayoral elections. We know that it is only going to be a maximum of 2, because the other seats that we were less likely to win, we ended up on results where we were within 3% of the win against Labour. And in fact, with the other 2 in North Tyneside and in Doncaster, Reform were within 1% of the win. The funniest one, though, the absolute most hilarious one that I could find, and that we were all looking forward to, was the Mayor of the West of England, where, yes, Labour did hold, however, Aaron Banks came second by 3%, beating out the Green candidate, and bear in mind, Mayor of West England is where Bath is, it's where Bristol is, it's a Green stronghold, and Reform still beat the Green Party. That is amazing. And a common thing that I haven't really mentioned so far, but now we're going into the losing side of it, as you can see, it is very much in a position of vote Conservative, get Labour. We are on that timeline now. I know a lot of Tory boys, if you want to call them that, Tory activists, who were in an existential crisis at the moment. And it's because of things like this. Tories have not come 4th place in a mayoral election for some years, I have to say. And it was Aaron Banks, of all people, who pushed them there. They're not happy. Again, it's not a win, but there is a very, very, very straight direction that all of these swings are going. and it is away from the uniparty and toward reform. That, thanks to the outcome of all of these elections, even the ones where we don't quite win, is the narrative that has been firmly established here. If you are within a few percent of winning an awful lot of these seats, you are quite clearly the actual competition to Labour and the right-wing party as an alternative to the Conservatives, who have washed away all of their credibility and none of it has recovered under Kemi Badenoch. What they are going to do, most people don't really know, most people don't really care. I don't think it's actually going to help getting Robert Jenrick in at this point. Everyone who would have voted for him is already firmly in reform, pretty much, bar a few stragglers. But I think even they'd struggle to support the Tories at this point. Anyway, on to the main event of the night. This was an election that I actually had a little bit of an input in, given I was one of the cogs in the machine that was handing out leaflets in the area. It was the Runcorn and Helsby by-election, and I'm putting up the swing here as well, because it is absurd. Labour lost around 10,000 voters in this by-election, whereas Reform gained 5,000, and it was one of the higher turnouts of by-elections at about 48%, I believe. And Reform clinched the win by 6 votes. Which to many people that may seem, oh, you only won it by 6, you should be devastating them. You've got to understand what it is like in the north, especially the northwest. A lot of people are just Labour until they die. They do not care. As long as there's a red rosette, they will vote. And they couldn't even manage to get even 6 more people out to make sure that Reform were kept out. Despite the fact that the North has Labour strongholds everywhere, we saw some of them fall with the Red Wall, it's understandable with the Tories. The Tories are established over centuries as being a party that has its act together. When it comes to Reform, they're brand new, effectively. They're very young, barely even a decade old. And yet they managed to beat the 49th safest Labour seat. I see a lot of people saying 16th. It's not 16th, it's 49th. Either way, that's out of 411. That means that over 350 seats, by definition, are at high risk of falling to Reform. Some of them maybe by a few votes. A lot of the ones that are a lot less safe, yeah, it's going to be a bloodbath. And in fact, today, it has been a bloodbath, as we have seen from the number of seats that they have won. And my favourite picture of the night definitely came from this by-election as well. Obviously, the chairman and leader were both at the most important count that there was that night, which was obviously Runcorn. And there is Mr. Farage soy-jacking out to the fact that he won by 6 votes, or helped win by 6 votes, I should say, along with Zahir Yousaf looking very smug with himself, managing in just a few months to get Reform to the point where they are now, with definitive proof, a direct threat to Labour. Very well done, boys. Anyway, on the question of the swing, when it came to Runcorn, you can see that actually the pollsters were underestimating how well Reform would do and how badly Labour and even the Tories would do. And in fact, they overestimated the Liberal Democrats as well. There is a rejection going on at the moment of all the old parties, and at the moment it is only Reform that are capitalising on it. As I say, I made a prediction in the past that the future could be a Reform versus Greens 2-party system, but it appears that unless radical things change in the next 3 years, the unions are going to stick with Labour. But it's clearly, at least from this particular data point, not going to be enough. Even with the polls, they thought they'd do badly, but in reality they did even worse than that. And a 21-point swing toward Reform in reality, up from 9, that is absurdly good. This is nothing short of a political earthquake. Anyone trying to downplay this, anyone telling you, oh, it was only 6 votes, what even is that? If we lost by 500 votes, say, I would be saying the exact same thing. I'm just ecstatic that Reform are back up to 5 MPs. And with future by-elections on the horizon, they could be up to 6. And if they're up to 6 despite losing Lowe, doesn't that just tell you who was right all along? Maybe, audience, I just know what I'm talking about sometimes. Maybe that's just the case. Maybe following emotionally driven morons online isn't the best way to do things. Maybe you need to go with the more level-headed approach toward these things. The more, let's take a step back, let's assess the situation, we'll see what goes on here. It's done wonders for me. And if that seems overly smug for you, I don't care, I'm right yet again. Anyway, looking at how this swing would be translated into the national effort, as you can see, you would end up with a stonking, an absolutely stonking, bigger than we have under Labour at the moment, Reform majority. That would be absolutely insane. You would have Conservatives with 4 seats. This isn't realistic, by the way, obviously. We're looking at a snapshot in a particular part of the northwest. However, this is still red wall territory. This is everything that Starmer had managed to gain back off the Tories after Boris Johnson blew it all. And Reform are effectively the vehicle that is going on the Boris Johnson train that he was originally getting us all to board on, and actually going through with the plan rather than falling back on whatever Greta Thunberg wanted, or whatever the people at the Financial Times wanted from Boris Johnson to get him invited to their dinner parties and nights out. I don't think, and I have never seen any evidence to convince me, that Reform or Richard Tice or, of course, Nigel Farage cares about any of that, given they seem to make their own fun. But you will still have people repeating that sort of nonsense, despite the fact that, as we can see, especially with Dame Andrea Jenkins, talking about dealing with the illegal immigration problem, talking about dealing with the economy, the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, all of these crises, they are serious about it and they have decent answers for it. This is why I'm so much in camp of Reform. If it's not them, it's no one. So why not support them while we are clearly not in a state of having no political answers? Anyway, Farage's reaction to all this good news was to announce that, Kemi Badenoch, please stay. Please don't resign. We want you to stay on as leader. I'll put in some money if you want to keep you there. Which, that quote's all over the place, I imagine, because he was probably up for about 24 hours at that point when he said that. So no shock to me his wording isn't great, but you get the idea. Kemi Badenoch has absolutely imploded the Tory party, and I don't see how they come back even with Robert Jenrick. I just don't see it happening. I don't see people trusting them. How can you be so incompetent as to effectively invite someone on to be your leader who is more of the same? And even if they do have another leadership election, I guarantee Jenrick won't win. It'll be James Cleverly. All of Robert Jenrick's supporters are in Reform now. So what are you going to do? Anyway, Labour on the night of the election were also in full-blown panic mode. This clip, by the way, is before we actually got any results. And, well, let's just say the fire extinguishers were out fairly early.
Alongside that, I would say that the more people see of Reform, the greater level of scrutiny that they have, not just in terms of the kinds of people that they put forward for elected office. And I should point out one of their MPs was also convicted of went to prison for assaulting his partner. So that's the kind of people that they send to Parliament.
I mean, people in glass houses, especially when it comes to this particular election, there is a by-election in Runcorn because one of your party assaulted a constituent. There's risk of another by-election because Dan Norris has been arrested on suspicion of rape, child sex offences, child abduction and misconduct in a public office. And then recently there was another Labour councillor who only just dodged jail after masturbating in front of a 13-year-old girl. Like, people in glass houses, Bridget, I'd be really careful with that at the moment. Especially when you're bringing something up that happened 12 years ago and he served his time for. I thought Labour was supposed to believe in rehabilitative justice, but apparently not to Phillipson, and apparently not if they reform.
In addition to that, you've got Nigel Farage, in effect, saying he doesn't believe in the NHS, something that is really held dearly by so many people across our country. He talks about an insurance model. I mean, that would be catastrophic. So I think...
You get the idea. It's pretty standard Labour attacks, and this is the message they constantly want out. Oh, Nigel Farage wants to improve our NHS. Can you believe that? I can't believe he'd want it to be a better system like it is over in Europe. Now, I understand that most people think that means privatising the NHS, and to an extent it does, but this is why he's got to taper the messaging and make it quite clear that it is actually a better system and nationalisation isn't the answer everywhere, but how you deliver that to an electorate that wants nothing but nationalisation, it's going to be tricky, and he may have to ditch it. Or even better, say you'll keep it nationalised and then don't when you get power. That would be based. Anyway, after this tirade, one of the best pollsters in Britain, John Curtis, had this to say.
We did secure a massive majority at the general election, and we fight on
35% of the vote, the lowest share of the vote of any government with a majority in British history.
I mean, we've got our system. We fought and won on that basis.
Your party conference voted against it in 2022.
Well, we don't have. We're not advocating for any change in the electoral system, but
I'm surprised.
He is a man who has the facts on his fingertips about everything to do with the electorate, the parties, and the way the country is going. And in fact, on The Spectator the other day, John Curtis was saying that Reform, no matter really what the election results were, had already won by the fact that they had the most candidates out of all put in these candidate seats. It shows that they have a decent ground game and their vote share is already quite high. In fact, according to the polls, they're the most popular party on aggregate. I would expect them to be on 30% in the coming year. I don't know when. I didn't think they'd be that high at this point. I thought there'd be way more of a struggle and I'd have to do more coping and seething. I don't. If anything, I'm underplaying how well they're doing. Case in point, there's just been another update as the day goes on. As of 1:30, the number of council seats is Reform at 245, Conservatives on 84, losing just under 200, Lib Dems gaining 30 at 65, Labour losing 63, being on 22 council seats. Independents have lost 16 to 22. That, I imagine, is because most of them moved over to Reform. And the Greens have gained 6 and only have 12 councillors. Again, total, utter, complete bloodbath. The Conservatives are on the Lib Dem levels of political influence, which post the coalition government isn't very much. Anyway, I'll quickly touch upon the other right-wing parties who are saying they're totally going to take over Reform and they're going to do the best. Firstly, it's William Coulston of the SDP, who I'm being told isn't a complete lunatic. Always a pleasure to see the SDP candidate on the BBC Summary and beating the Lib Dems. Well done, David Bettany. They got 1.3% of the vote. Tories, not Tories, we're Reform now. Reform, the new mainstream right-wing party, lost this election by a single percent. The splitting of the right-wing vote is not good. These alternative parties, unironically, are managing to make us do the meme of I'm going to vote for a third party candidate, and then the main two parties end up having the worst outcome out of the two because you're completely clueless. William Coulston's unironically done the meme and he didn't even realise. You're not supposed to unironically do the meme. Anyway, Homeland was also involved in some of these council elections, and so far the best I've seen is Steve Laws getting 50. Nobody wants Homeland. Their best result came from someone who's not even in the party anymore. Dead end, dead in the water. I've been through all that. You want to have some fun though, go watch the video that I did on them, because they effectively collapsed over hiring a femboy to lead Northern Ireland. Very funny stuff. Ends up with barely any votes. You love to see it. Anyway, I think we've well and truly established Reform are the only players in town. They are eating the Tories for breakfast, as Keir Starmer put it, but actually the results that we are seeing from these by-elections is that they are having Labour for lunch, as, of course, Nigel Farage put it. But it's time to address this whole drama that an awful lot of people at this point seem to have forgotten, which is very funny considering what an awful lot of people were saying at the time, and that's the Rupert Lowe issue. Literally 2 days before the election, this was thrown out on the Telegraph. Rupert Lowe, Britain needs a plan, not a protest. Think twice before voting Reform. Raising then dashing the hopes of the British people would be simply unforgivable. Effectively, I'm not reading through this by the way, I know what he's going to say because I've been through enough of his tweets, and I don't really care anymore. But effectively this headline is saying, and signalling to the Telegraph readers, do not vote Reform, and Telegraph readers are the most likely to move from Tory to Reform, given it's known as the Tory graph. And obviously it was mentioned the other day by Rupert that he's not going to be an independent forever, and so the question on everyone's mind is, who's he joining? From this, along with other things he's been saying, although he has been counter-signalling the Tories in some aspects, is signalling to me that there is going to be a bit of a Tory coup, and they are hoping that Rupert Lowe getting on board will be enough for people to think we can trust the Tories again. I know Ben Habib bought these shares in a party and is the overall controller of it. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think at the end of the day, you can't talk for ages and counter-signal for ages the fact that you think Farage is going to absolutely bottle it, you think that Reform is not going to be the way forward, and having to fall back on, hey, just don't trust them as your main argument against them, and then build a party that ends up just being effectively another SDP. It's not going to work. Rupert Lowe, Ben Habib, Howard Cox as well as another one who comes up a lot, they don't have that type of clout. They're effectively gossip columnists who go on Dan Wootton and nothing else to effectively whinge about Farage and tell them how he was mean to them 10 years ago or whatever. Nobody cares anymore. People are at a point where things have to be done now. Farage is the only person in their mind who can do it. So you may as well get on that train until his time's passed, but I don't think his time is going to be passed for probably another decade, to be quite honest with you. The man just wanted to retire, and he came back because people in the street kept saying, please come back, we need you. And he did. And I'm supposed to believe that's some sort of grift. If he wanted a grift, he would have stayed on GB News, raking up the millions for talking about all this nonsense every evening at 7 o'clock. But he didn't do that. He went out and non-stop campaigned. After Rupert Lowe was kicked out of the party, what's he done? Gone onto Twitter, whinged and moaned that life isn't fair, written an article trying to undermine the hard, and I mean hard work, that thousands of people in Reform have been doing to get these election results, and they managed it. And Rupert's in the corner, whinging about it all, effectively because it's another positive in the Farage camp. I'm sorry, I am on the side of winners, not whingers. That's just the end of it. And that's why I went out and canvassed for Reform, and why I'd do it again. I suggest you do too. Anyway, on the Twitter front, these snakes decided to give backhanded compliments to the very people they've been undermining for the past few months. Rupert Lowe, to be fair to him, was very abstract about who he was complimenting, saying well done to all those who put themselves forward for elections. Win or lose, the men and women who stand by their convictions deserve respect. To the winners, congratulations. Effectively representing your community is no easy task, and I wish you all well. I find it a bit hubristic to put something like this out when 2 days ago you were trying to scupper the very chances of the people who you were supposedly in a party with, though according to Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe was actually never part of the Reform Party. He was just selected as a candidate by Ben Habib, so there you go. Ben Habib is the snake in the background who, in my mind, has been effectively guiding Rupert Lowe through his complete and utterly embarrassing crash out. Here he is pretending that he's not been counter-signalling Reform for the last few months. The people voted to get back their country in 2016, they didn't get it. They voted again in 2019 and didn't get it. Again in 2019 and didn't get it. Voted yet again last night. Let's make sure this time it happens. Well, you know, they probably could, and you could be part of that, Ben, if you didn't throw your toys out of the pram and realise that the man who has managed to have some of the largest political upsets of the past 2 decades is probably the man who knows what he's doing when it comes to upsetting the political establishment. Oh, he managed it again. Unbelievable. You have been fighting that upset, from what it looks like, out of pure spite. Honestly, I'd have a bit more respect for you if you were just joining the Tory party after all this, but if you didn't even do that, you've done it for no reason, and should enjoy your time back in the shadows, complaining at the sidelines, trying to nip at his heels. Honestly, pathetic what some of these people have been doing for the past few months. The reason I'm so angry about it, by the way, is because I'm part of the people who have gone out to actually help win this election. Many, many more people done far more than me, put their heads above the parapet, have had to effectively let some of their friends, family, and even work colleagues know that they're effectively joining a uncouth political party and standing for them. And for some people, that is a genuine risk. You know, there's a chance that they lose friends, family, and possibly even their jobs over things like this. And Ben Habib has done his best to make it an even riskier venture. He's not an ally, he's an enemy, as far as I'm concerned. And while we're still on this point, there are other mainstream pundits who are making the same point I am. As Matt Goodwin says, my thoughts are to all those people on this platform who only a few weeks ago declared it was all over for Nigel Farage and Reform. Spend less time on X and spend more time out there in the country. There's only one alternative. Which has been my point. Why has it been my point? I've been out there in the country, leafleting. I talk to the normie people. A lot of them are fed up with everything. An awful lot of them, especially the, let's say, middle to upper class Tory voters, or classic Tory voters, are effectively on a coin flip of who they're going to vote for now. Do you trust Nigel Farage? Well, he's just in it for himself. Oh, he's a dirty, dirty man. Oh, but then again, his track record's still better than the Tories, so who do they end up voting for? It's basically a coin toss, but I think it's going to become a lot more clear in a few years, especially as it's clear that Reform have professionalised and they are managing to actually win these damn things. Do not trust people who spend all their time online and are emotionally driven morons. They do not know what they're talking about. Anyway, Dan Hodges has decided to go on one of his good takes days, where he makes pretty much the same point. The other thing about Runcorn, it's a complete vindication of the Farage use of modernisation strategy, which is very much the strategy I was behind pretty much from the whole Lowe fiasco. Showing Lowe the door, shunning the Robinson fanboys, selecting a mainstream candidate like Sarah Potchin, the whole implosion narrative was rubbish. In fact, the opposite happened. They've surged. It's a tidal wave. It's a nuclear bomb on the current political establishment. How bad is it? Well, let's take a look. Well, early signs from the Tory party are that effectively it's unending despair. A very senior Tory despairs that they cannot see how the party begins to regain any sense of relevance after today. And of all people, it's Steve Baker who is saying that that is unhelpful. Well, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what the hell you can do. It's too late. You allowed people like Boris Johnson to ruin everything, got someone like Liz Truss in who had a bumpy start and there wasn't enough support for her, to then get Rishi Sunak in who, well, did basically nothing to actually help the situation. Tories are dead. It's over. I don't see how they come back from it. I don't even think God himself could save the Tory party at this point. They are effectively propped up by old age pensioners who think they're going to get the winter fuel allowance back, and who, frankly, most of them probably aren't going to live till next election. I'm just throwing that out there. It's morbid, but it's true. And when it comes to Labour, I think it's well summed up in this Spectator paragraph. Throughout this campaign, Farage has struck a more left-wing tone on economics. Some of Starmer's MPs will want him to now do the same. But while policy is important, both the politics and implementation of it clearly matter too. To be absolutely clear on that point, Starmer is absolutely being slightly more left-wing on economics than certainly the past few Tory governments. It's just mostly it's been let's tax people more. Whereas funnily enough, Nigel Farage's whole thing is, right, let's really cut down the size of the state, let's relieve quite a bit of the tax burden, let's get business going, which I don't think is that left-wing, aside from obviously the big let's nationalise steel, which makes sense really when you think about it, because having a national steel supply chain while the private sector is failing everywhere because of high energy prices is sensible just for national security alone. So while policy is important, both politics and implementation of it clearly matter. The Prime Minister told broadcasters this morning that the message I take out of these elections is that we need to go further, we need to go faster on the change that people want to see. He will also consider whether he should now have his first post-election reshuffle. Yes, it's got so bad that there is open talk of reshuffle now. This isn't just coming from The Spectator, I'm seeing it all over Twitter, I'm seeing it in headlines such as Angela Rayner's thinking of quitting as well because she can't hit a 1.5 million housing target because of the ridiculous planning laws we have. It's a mess, and it's not going well. In doing so, he ought to reflect on which ministers have taken sensible decisions in office and which have listened too much to bad advice from officials. Well, it's going to be a mess whatever happens because I think people are fed up with both of them. It's a disaster. It's a bloodbath. Anyway, I will leave you with this absolutely wonderful map. This is as a quarter of the councils have been announced, and already at this point, we know that Reform have taken Durham, Staffordshire and Lincolnshire. Northumberland is still under no overall control, but quite clearly you are seeing basically no red on this map. There's barely any, and that is all you could ask for. My ideal future would be two right-wing parties, the Reform Party versus the Tory Party, having an arms race to try and get effectively as close to my position as possible, of course, but to deliver strong borders and stop this ridiculous socialist experiment we've had for basically a century, bar the 10 years we had Maggie Thatcher. Say what you like about the Reform Party, about Farage and even Zahir Yousaf, they have made a force to be reckoned with. This is the most optimistic I've felt about politics since Boris Johnson, and obviously we all know how that went. But hey, if I wasn't optimistic, I'd just cry myself to sleep every night. But I think with that, I've been vindicated, Zahir and Farage have been vindicated, Reform are on to be a hell of a force in politics. God knows what the other parties are going to do, but it's going to be an interesting few years. This is now the chaotic part of the clown decade, where we have a mixture of things getting better as things getting worse starts to dissipate and take more of a back seat as things that are getting better come more to the forefront. And there is only one vehicle that has managed that successfully so far since the craziness of COVID, and that is Reform. Massive well done to absolutely everyone who is involved in getting Reform elected, and well done obviously to the other candidates who were successful. Hopefully the future will be a lot better than it has been for the recent past. I think at this point the right really needs to stop infighting, and I do hope that a lot of the smaller right-wing factions start just coming together and supporting reform, because it's all you can do for now. They've made that quite clear. They're not going anywhere. They are doing, frankly, better than expected, and I can't see this energy going anywhere for quite some time, especially while we have useless Labour in charge. But anyway, I think with that, that is everything I had for you for today. So tomorrow we have Laughing at the Guardian. Do come along to that at 8 PM. It's going to be a crazy one with what's happened today. Next Tuesday is Tosh News, which again I think is going to be another crazy one because of what's happened this week. Thursday, obviously, I'm going to be back playing Subnautica, and videos out as and when I can make them. For now, do enjoy the weekend. The sun's still shining, it's got its hat on. And obviously, if you made it to this point in the video, do subscribe, do leave a like, do leave a comment. If you've got this far, clearly you like me enough to maybe consider becoming a member, giving a super chat or super thanks. I think we're all in good mood here. It's time to celebrate after all. I'm going to go do my horses, and then I'm going to be drinking like a sailor for the rest of the day, because I think we've all earned it. I go out a couple of times to leaflet, and this is my reward for it. I expect I will be doing an awful lot more work once the elections come to Wales, but until then, I'm going to do what I can for the constituencies and the areas near me. Thank you, Reform, for giving me this feeling that there is hope in the political world for people like me, who just want a normal country. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.